Hey everyone, how's it going? Juan Dhas here, and welcome back to this week's video. And today I wanted to do something a little bit different and talk about sound and setup. I got a lot of questions and a lot of comments about how I've been enjoying a higher action, or how it sounds and things like that. And I thought, this actually might be a really interesting video to do, especially because I don't consider myself much of a gearhead per se, even though I do think about like maybe settings I use here or what my instrument does. I prefer to focus on playing mostly, and that's kind of what I dedicate, playing and writing, and that's what I dedicate a lot of my time to. And sometimes I can leave tech specs until the last possible minute, even though they might actually be a very important part, or at least important to a certain degree when it comes to understanding the instrument. So what I'm going to do in this video, I'm going to do something and talk about how action improves sound, or rather not improve, affect sound, because I don't want this video to be a statement of you should play with higher action or you should play with lower action. Everyone has different needs, and I know personally some people, or including friends of mine, they have to avoid higher action on purpose because it can cause tendonitis problems. So to each their own. But one half is going to be dedicated to how action is affecting the sound, and the other half is going to be talking about how action affects my actual playing. So diving right in, I wanted to consider, why was I going to raise my action? Why would I want to? And the simple answer is that I was just bored. One day I was just kind of like, I'm kind of hitting another wall. Which if you haven't checked out my Breaking Ruts video, that might be a good one to check out. But this one's kind of not really from a playing sense. And, sometimes we need a new sound or something to maybe move us in a different direction or a new feel. And the more elaborate answer is that over the course of the pandemic, which has kind of been one of the good things, I suppose, that's happened in this whole time, is that my playing, because I've had the time to really go inward and, work on stuff that I've been meaning to work on, or maybe explore some paths that I maybe haven't had the time to explore, or, I could use this period to really kind of explore some paths without feeling the pressure of, oh, maybe if I make this change, I might have my playing affected and I've got a gig the next week, things like that. I didn't have the external pressure up until recently, I suppose. Fun fact, one of the I raised the action 2 weeks ago, then had a gig right after, and then raised it again. So that's kind of an example of what I'm talking about. And I first raised my action about a year ago, just to see what would happen. I did a half turn on the saddles, raised it, liked where it was at, but then I kind of ran into a wall. I was like, okay, maybe I need a little more. And I kind of figured out that raising the action was what I needed to do. So then I did a quarter turn, felt I had a little more left in the tank and I could take maybe a little more resistance from the instrument, and raised it again by another quarter turn. So now my action's sitting somewhere maybe around 2.5-ish, I don't know, somewhere around there. I'd say it's like a medium high, give or take. Bear in mind I'm coming from an action that was like as low as it could possibly get. So then asking myself, why did I want to try this? My playing was taking a much more dynamic turn, and one thing I needed was being able to access dynamics and really getting the full dynamic resonant range out of the instrument. And a higher action can help this. It makes it easier. Actually, it was recommended that even though I could access quite extreme dynamics normally with a low action, it would be much easier with a high action. And maybe it would open up the instrument even more to maybe something that I hadn't experienced, which I think is quite true. So I'd say one of the things that happens when you raise your action is suddenly your dynamic range gets much larger, because the string has more room to vibrate. Hey, I'm not a physicist, but, you know, string has more room to vibrate. You get a more fuller, bloomed sound, so to speak. Nice harmonic. You know, I've even noticed the change in waveforms and how my amp responds, so much so that I think I had to change like a couple of settings on my Zoom when it's picking up the audio, just because my guitar was louder. It was projecting more through the amp. Right? So that's something to consider when you're raising your action. Do you want access to this stuff? Like whisper quiet to much louder. And this is especially more noticeable in your lower registers, where one thing I noticed, this was a personal thing when raising the action, is that my low end kind of increased as well. Not only were my highs kind of more rounded and more, they kind of leapt out of the instrument a little more. Excuse the analogy, I know it's a little bizarre. While the highs kind of leapt out of the instrument a little more, the lows also did as well. So what I found myself doing was my tone knob went up a smidge again, and now it's sitting at about 7. So I've noticed with every time I've raised my action, my tone knob is also going up a little more. I don't know if that's cause and effect or it's just a placebo thing to compensate, but I have noticed that it kind of keeps the low end in check. However, another thing I've noticed about the sound is that, especially when it comes to big chords, let's say something like this, I can hear more separation between each note. It doesn't really get too muddy. Like that's very crisp and very clear, or I think of like this low C over E that I use a lot. It really blooms, and especially because, you know, I use my Zoom to pick up my acoustic attack. The instrument is just livelier. It's much louder. You know, it's a really nice effect to have, and I've noticed that the whole instrument kind of resonates more. I started feeling a lot more resonance in my left hand traveling up. Not tension, by the way, resonance coming from the neck of the instrument, even feeling it all the way up in the first fret area. And I also noticed the body resonates a little more, where before I wasn't really feeling much. Now, I mean, you know, I'm a guy who's relatively tall, like 6'1", and sitting on a very low couch, so my knees are kind of up to my chest at this point. And the body of the instrument would be resonating against my chest and my rib cage. So, and this isn't even coming from the amp, it's just kind of an acoustic resonance. So And I notice when that translates to an amplified setup, just every frequency kind of fills in a little better. It's just a personal observation. Even I've noticed the balance is quite improved. Where's that high C? There it is. There's a lot more sustain on the instrument as well. Things kind of ring true. So all in all, I've kind of enjoyed this experiment of what happens to the sound. And I've had to make a couple of changes to compensate for it, but all in all, I like how it resonates a little more, and I think it's a little more fitting for where I'm currently at, musically speaking. So if you're approaching action from a sound perspective, and I don't know, maybe you feel like your instrument isn't kind of giving you something that you've been looking for, consider a tweak to your action. Is it the be-all end-all? No, I definitely see the uses for low action. I used to be a low action guy myself. Like, when I mean low, I mean like paper, like you couldn't even fit a paper through and somehow the instrument doesn't buzz, That would be a question I would get a lot. How do you have such a low action, but it doesn't buzz? Things like that. So it would, I went from that to kind of wanting to raise the action, and I think that is a playing choice and really an aesthetic sound choice that you have to consider when making that choice. Again, as I say, and kind of have been making the point of, but I'm just running around in circles, make the choice on your own. It is your personal decision whether you choose to or not. Or sometimes it might be your body's decision. Maybe your hands just say, no, I can't take this. And you have to bring it down for whatever, whether it be a personal condition or, just your natural physiology. So, getting into playing, because I think this might be a more interesting approach. How has sound affected, or raising the action affected my playing? I think the first question people ask is, does it affect your speed much? In my case, I haven't noticed too much of a difference. Maybe it's because my touch is very light, so I've not really been kind of putting a lot more energy into my note. I have noticed stuff becoming more defined, though. That's not a great example, but I have noticed things kind of leaping out of the instrument a little more. I have noticed that. And in general, as far as speed is concerned, it's still pretty zippy for me. So maybe I do notice there is a little bit of left-hand fatigue, but that was something I experienced the first time I raised my action, and then after a few weeks it was gone and my hands were acclimated. So it's kind of, again, personal, I'm still able to play at the speed I usually do. However, that wasn't my motivator for changing to a higher action. As I said, one thing I wanted was dynamic range. And I feel that I can go from a very quiet... I have to expend less effort to play quietly, which I think is a very useful thing. Because before with a low action, at least if I would just even tap the string or blow on it, you know, you get like quite a decent attack already. Right? I feel that's just a much more expressive form of playing. And as such, because of, you know, it requires a little bit more effort, I guess this is kind of good in a certain way. I can't just go on autopilot. And for people who know me, the people who know me know that autopilot is, or that autopilot mentality is not somewhere I enjoy being. I don't like to switch off when I play and just be numb to everything that's around me. I do like to be open and listening. So because of the higher action, you know, if I just kind of go into that autopilot mode, the instrument kind of kicks back a little and says, hey, listen, you know, you're not playing, don't play stuff you already know. Or rather, it's saying, you're not going to get away with it that easily. So I have to be very deliberate. And I think that's probably a connection as to why my playing speed hasn't suffered, in the sense that what's probably happening is that I know that the instrument is going to resist a little bit. Thank you. So I know the instrument is going to resist a little bit. So when I do play fast, it's a very conscious intent behind that decision, which probably explains why those ideas leap out of the instrument a little more. And as such, as I said, there's this conscious intent behind what I'm doing. So everything kind of rings a little more true. Also, I've noticed like playing high is much more pleasant. It's not really shrill. It's quite round because there's more room for the string to resonate. You see, that's like a very fat note. And it doesn't sound like a very weak high A. It's quite resonant. And you know, as I say, I have to be more aware of my volume knob and things like that, and I'm controlling things much more, really getting in touch with my instrument. So, all in all, I hope this video was really informative for you guys. I'm not doing an extended lesson on Patreon this week, just because, you know, I don't think it lends itself to this lesson. But it's really more of a consideration of how can setup affect your sound and your playing. I think we're very fortunate as guitar players in that tweaking something can give us a very different sound, and it can be a way of breaking us out of a rut. It can be a way of accessing something new that maybe we hadn't thought about. Consequently, just changing your action can be a really interesting decision to make, and I just wanted to put this video up there from a player's perspective as to what happens when you raise your action or tweak it. As I think it maybe not enough people think about it in that regard, and I know for a matter of fact that I never considered how much changing the action could affect my sound. So give it a try. I'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments. Also, if you have any lesson topics, please do let me know. And do like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out a ton. We're very, very, very close to 2K. So let's hope we can hit that goal. All right. Thanks for listening, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.